Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Hey guys, well, I am super excited to welcome my friend and pastor, Brady Cooper, to the podcast today. Pastor Brady, welcome.
It is great to be here, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brady is the pastor of New Vision Baptist Church, or I guess we're just New Vision Church. New Vision Church here in Murfreesboro.
We're still Baptist. We just have muted the Baptist a little bit with some people.
Right. Yeah, that's good. But you've been senior pastor there since 2003, and you're a Murfreesboro native. Grew up here, and so maybe we'll talk a little bit about leading a church like New Vision in the town where you grew up a little bit today. So I got to know Brady, I guess really the first time we got to know each other was I was on staff. Do you remember me being in the children's ministry?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually, and I've told this story in an earlier episode or podcast, but I was actually working for Jim Tracy. He was running for Congress, and I get a call before the election from our executive pastor at the time, and he's like, "You want to come work in the children's ministry at New Vision?" Because, I'd kind of gone through Brian Owen, who was a mentor of mine, who was on staff for a long time. So I was working for Jim Tracy and get a call from our executive pastor at the time, and it's like, "You want to come work on an interim basis in the children's department as associate?" And I was like, all right, here we go. He had known, and Brian and I think a few had known in leadership that I'd kind of been wrestling with this call to ministry. And so that was kind of the foray into ministry at the time.
So working with us just for a few months, you realize I don't want to do that anymore. That's
right.
I know what I don't want to do. Yeah.
But then oddly enough, our paths kind of stayed a little bit crossed and connected because, that was an interim role. And so I had reconnected in that process with a longtime friend whose dad was my pastor growing up in First Baptist Bolivar. And he was on staff at First Baptist Hendersonville.
Yeah.
And so they decided they wanted to start like a college ministry there. And so I got to go and do that. And of course, that's where you spent early part of your ministry career.
Absolutely.
Was at First Baptist Hendersonville with your father-in-law who led that congregation for a long time.
That's right. It was a good time in my life. I really enjoyed that for sure.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
people.
And so, of course, once I met my wife, she was really good friends with who's your daughter-in-law now. And so we became great friends with them. And, they got married about, I don't know, a month or so after us. And then lo and behold, we both got pregnant less than a year into marriage. So we were thrown into
the jungle.
Parenthood. Real quick. So really appreciate you coming on and doing this. And so today really just want to kind of hear your story. How you got started in ministry and that call to ministry, and then obviously you've shepherded a church that's gone from really small to probably over 6,000 people at least that are attending on Sunday mornings, in a city that's grown also exponentially in that same amount of time. And then just talk about, we like to talk about personal growth and balance. And so we'll kind of dive into those things. But one of the things that I always ask every guest at the beginning of every episode is, obviously this is the Legacy Builders podcast. And so when you think of the word legacy, what is that word? What does it mean to you? And how has that shaped how you view your life and work?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think about it more now, Matt, than I probably ever have, as I get older. But I guess just to be succinct, a legacy for me is leaving a path for the folks really closest to me, my boys, my grandchildren, the people that I care about the most. As a pastor, of course, you shepherd and care about so many people, but just leaving a path, the way I live my life, what's important to me, the ups and the downs, leaving a path for people to follow.
Yeah.
You know, that's to me how I would view legacy.
Yeah.
Really important thing.
That's good. So let's talk a little bit about, the call to ministry for you. So just talk a little bit about, you don't have to give all the details, but just a little bit about kind of your upbringing, and then get us to, that time figuring out, wrestling with that call and what that decision was like, and then kind of the early part of that journey for you.
Yeah. I love how you say you don't have to give all the details. That's what you have to say to preachers. You really have to make sure that they don't go on forever. I think, first of all, as a Christ follower, I think we're all in ministry. I really believe that. I mean, God wants to use all of us. And so, but, vocational ministry it's a different thing. I really think, and that for me, my dad, I didn't have really anybody in my family that was their track. And that's not anything really growing up that I ever thought about. To be honest, I loved athletics. That was growing up, that's what I was so passionate about. I saw myself being a coach. That's what I wanted to do one day is probably coach. And, it's just through college, just a growing sense that God was sort of up to something, and I couldn't shake that maybe God wanted to use me in this way.
Yeah.
And, a lot of pretty, some significant events, some real hard things that happened that God used. But I kind of kept getting some opportunities. My college baseball coach, he'd just have me on the weekends when we were on the road. I'd just do a devotion. He just, and so they would
have you do the devotion.
Yeah, he just had me do they were terrible.
Because you played baseball at Belmont.
Yeah, Belmont.
Right?
Yeah. And so, but I just found myself getting so excited about every one of those opportunities, like 10 minutes just to read some scripture and have a thought about that. And so just more and more opportunities until finally it just began to be kind of, undeniable that this is what God wanted me to do. I had a lot of fear. I didn't feel worthy. I still don't. And just, all kinds of things that would make me think reasons why I couldn't. But finally, every opportunity I got, I just loved it, know, and I just wanted a little bit more of that. And I kind of got to that place where I couldn't see myself doing anything else and really being satisfied with that. And so, that's kind of how it went down for me.
There's some leadership lessons there from your baseball coach, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you think back how impactful, that's what seemed like a very small thing of just, Brady, why don't you do the devotion for the team? Yeah. And how that really, in hearing you talk, was kind of what started you on that path.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And you know what I think about, people are listening, there may be coaches, or we have chances just to influence in so many different ways. He was a guy who was a follower of Jesus. I mean, he might have been a little bit muted in his faith. He's just kind of a tough, hard-nosed guy a little bit. But
what baseball coach isn't?
Right. But, I never will forget this. He called me up to his office one day, and he had just an old, just sheet of yellow notebook paper, like a legal pad. It had every guy on the team's name. And he was, in his mind, he was trying to ascertain if they were a follower of Christ or not. And he kind of had a check mark by the ones he thought were. And he would ask me what I thought. And he said, he had a big old chew of tobacco in his mouth. It was so crazy, man. He'd take an old milk jug, and he would just cut the top out of that milk jug and put, paper towels in it. He just spit tobacco. Pretty gross. Maybe you wouldn't do that today. This is a long, 30 years ago, I guess, or more now. And he said, I pray for one of these guys, each and every one of these guys every day.
Yeah.
And, man, through the years, just story after story of guys coming to faith in Christ. And I think really it all comes back to that one dude. Yeah. Just taking the time to pray for these guys in his life. And it was powerful.
So you talked about how there was kind of really a series of things that kind of led to this call to ministry. So let's kind of, I guess, fast forward a little bit. You finally get to the point where, like, all right, this is what I know the Lord's calling me to do. Mm-hmm. What were kind of the next things that you did?
Yeah. So, I was at Belmont. The reason I was there is because I got a scholarship. It wasn't because that's where I wanted to end up. I just, I wanted to play ball, and I got a chance to play there. So that's where I was, but they had a school of religion there. So I just thought, well, I'm here, and that's what and so I my major was religion and biblical studies. I just happened to be in a school that gave me the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Met some great men and great women that were there and really helped me and shaped me. I thought upon, in graduation, I was getting married right after that, a few months after that, and just looking for that first opportunity. I was trying to go on staff with FCA actually, because I just thought my love for sports and that just seemed like I wanted to do
passions,
that.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. And so, New Vision, the church that I'm at now, was, they were looking for somebody to do children's ministry and basically everything other than the pastor. They were, and so I was like, man, what? Yeah, I'll take it, just whatever. Yeah. So, making $15,000 a year and doing a little bit of everything, but it was a great training ground for me, for sure.
So, you talked a little bit about your baseball coach.
Yeah.
Who were some other kind of mentors that were really pivotal in either that decision that called the ministry, or early part of your ministry career, so to speak?
Yeah. My mom and dad, I come from I'm so fortunate. My mom's just such a strong believer. My dad, both of his parents, they live there in Nashville, and just were super supportive, strong believers, and really helped me and encouraged me. My dad's just still one of my best friends, if not my best friend in the world, and just, great work ethic and just, hard-nosed dude, but he taught me a lot. And, he didn't understand this world of ministry, but he wanted to be as supportive as he could.
Sure.
And his lessons along the way, like his career was in manufacturing. And so ministry and manufacturing are different. So he was just, and still to this day, man, like, is just the biggest encourager in my life. And so really shaped me. And then after I got married, of course, Amy's dad was probably one of the best pure preachers I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. And so I was so fortunate to have him in my life. Just, it was just like the great consultant that was right there as a part of my family. Yeah. So that was helpful. And then I went to work for him and learned a ton working for him. So that was just really, looking back, it's neat just to see how God kind of brought all those things together, converged in my life.
So, looking back over, the past 20 plus years at New Vision, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges. Mm-hmm. There's probably been some.
Yeah.
And then some of the challenging part of leading a large church, and then also the positive, like the rewarding things about leading a larger church in a town like a city like Murfreesboro.
Yeah. Well, there have been a lot of challenges, and that's true of anybody's career.
Sure.
There's always going to be those challenges. And, I think the hardest thing was when I came back to Murfreesboro in 2003, the city is just starting to explode. I mean, that was on the front end of it. I mean, I grew up I grew up in Blackman when Blackman was not cool, man. It was like, if you've been in Murfreesboro for a long time, it was like the Blackman market, and that was it. There was nothing out there.
Yeah.
And so the city started growing, really rapidly. Yeah. I mean, the story of even New Vision, where the location was, I mean, that was just a landlocked farm that nobody really wanted, had all kinds of problems because of the battlefield. Understand some codes issues because of the battlefield. Right. And then Thompson Lane comes right through there, and all of a sudden the city just, builds up around there. And so it was just this incredible location.
Right. Absolutely.
And none of those things that, from a leadership perspective, none of that we had any control over.
It just kind of happened.
It happened. So there's really no lesson of leadership on that I could say, hey, do this, this, and this. It was just what God had done. But the challenge was the culture. Back to your question, the culture began to change. People started coming, and so the church began to grow, and some people that it was just different. It was kind of like the rules changed. I mean, they liked like the place where, they knew everybody. And that's the things I would hear. I don't know everybody. And I was telling a group of people about an hour ago, I was sitting with the team, and we had somebody who just got mad, and he left the church, and he said, I loved it back in the day when there was a problem, when there was something that needed to be fixed, and they called me and I came and I fixed it. I mean, he just volunteered. And he said, now we've hired somebody to do that. And I was like, man, I was celebrating the fact that we're growing, and then some people just bemoan that because the culture had changed.
Yeah.
And so navigating that a little bit was hard. And people that, this is, I guess, maybe embarrassing, but of the 10 people who were on the committee who called me, I think within a year or so, most every one of them left. And that was tough.
Yeah.
You know, and that was kind of a gut check for Amy and I. But then just seeing what God has done, just to continue to bring folks. And I had to learn early on that, man, I just can't take everything so personally. Because that was just destroying me, you know, and you're always going, no matter what you do. And I think in any facet of our life, there's just going to be plenty of critics.
Oh yeah.
You know,
you can't be all things to all people. Is that that's the saying, something like that?
Well, I always say, I want to learn from that. Cause I don't want to be so arrogant that I want to
brush
listen.
it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause man, I made some really bad mistakes as a leader early on. And so I want to listen. I want to learn from it, and then I got to leave it. Yeah. You know, I've got to move on because it just was weighting me down. So
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the flip side of that. Some of the great things over the past 20 years, the rewarding things about leading a church like New Vision. What that's like for you as the leader.
Yeah. So many things. I think individual stories of people whose lives had just been kind of wrecked, maybe by addiction, or, you know, just gone through just failure in their life and just were bottomed out, and then just seeing them, God just do a work and radically change them, reshape their family, see marriages come back together. Those are the kind of things that at the end of the day, you know, that are super encouraging.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, I want our church to be the kind of church that if we went away, there'd be a hole in the city. Like that there's things here that, you know, by God's grace that we're able to do that are making a difference in the town that we live in. And I love that.
Yeah.
That's really, really powerful. But also just what God's done in my life. Like I don't think God's not concerned with the size of a pastor's church. He's concerned about what's going on in an individual's heart. And for me, you know, the biggest mistakes I made early on were with my family. I just, you know, worked all the time, and, you know, my work, even though you could look at it and say it was ministry, but it got unhealthy, and it cost me a lot with my family. That was the biggest mistake. But still, I think if you brought both of my boys in today, one of them listens to this podcast, I hope he would say this. They have gotten to see some really cool things that God has done. Yeah. You know, I always say they weren't there to see when the Red Sea parted under Moses, but we also have those stories where we saw just impossible things that God did. And so that's a cool part of it.
That's good. So let's kind of transition to talk a little bit more about, you know, New Vision's approach to kind of discipleship and outreach and really biblical teaching in today's society. And then just talk about how, you know, New Vision, the church at large, teaches people to live out their faith in the workplace and in the community, which is kind of at the heart of what you talked about when you talked about, you know, some of the great things, some of the rewarding things you think about are, you know, if the church were to go away, would it leave a hole in the community? I personally think, yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things when you brought that up that comes to mind is the thing that we do at Christmas where we pack the boxes. And honestly, I couldn't tell you the name of it. But I know there's a few ministries in town that you know, all of these families benefit from it. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's an incredible thing that we do. Yeah.
Christmas Delivered. Yeah. And there's a lot of ministry partners here in town that it is amazing to see the people that, you know, fill those boxes and spend, you know, we say the limit's $50 on this and they'll spend $150 on a box. It's crazy how they do that. So yeah, that's a cool thing.
So how do you balance, this might be the $1 million question.
Yeah.
He's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
But how do you balance staying biblically grounded while also meeting people where they are in today's culture. And
Yeah.
I'll just kind of leave it at that, because we could take that all kinds of ways, places.
Yeah, I think, the Bible tells us that we are to be full of grace and truth, and living in the tension of that. And so, it's a place where, everybody is welcome to come, and we have people that, believe very differently, but they're welcome to come. But, I don't have the freedom to change the word of God. I mean, that's the truth. And that's the basis of really everything we do. I tell people I don't have anything of any worth or any value, but I believe God's word. It's true. It's been just so faithful for me throughout the years. And so we want to stand on that. And I think that's an important thing, but I think just caring for people deeply, and they're on this journey, and being patient, with them. And, I never will forget, there was a young girl who was living a different lifestyle. And so she came into my office, and we were, it's kind of even hard to talk about. We were talking and listening to her story. It's a young lady who just abused her, her mom's got boyfriend after boyfriend. That was her story. And she's raped multiple times. And being able to really sit and hear how confused and the pain, and really sit in that pain with her, and not just this stance we have, but really introduce her to a Jesus who loves her and wants to come in and meet that need in her life. And it's a safe place to talk about what you're going through. And that's what I love. When I think about grace and truth, I think that's, there's some folks that they know the truth, but they just don't have any grace. And I think when you study the Gospels and see Jesus, the way that he ministered and cared for the least of these is just an unbelievable thing. The people who had the biggest problem with Jesus was the religious crowd.
Yeah.
It wasn't the tax collectors or the prostitutes of his day. It was the other side of that. So, yeah.
So in today's kind of, the political climate.
Yeah.
How do you, because I actually was looking at this over the weekend, the Barna group, who's kind of a Christian-based, do research with churches and pastors. A lot of reason that pastors have really left the ministry over the past 5 years at least is around, a lot of them, one of the top 3 things is, political divisiveness, and kind of this pressure that comes along with that. How have you, as a pastor, dealt with, and a leader dealt with, when to speak and when not to speak on certain issues?
Yeah, it's a great question, a hard question. And it is a challenge. There's no question about that. There are issues that are just moral issues. They aren't political issues. We've sort of let politics take that. Those are issues, for me, sanctity of life, that's an issue. The Bible's just, really, really clear on that. Yeah. Man, I'm a dude that, my mom was pregnant with me when she's just out of her senior year in high school, and my parents got married. I have a great marriage, but that's a biblical issue. That's also a personal issue with me, and so I don't. That's not a political thing for me. That's just a biblical thing. Yeah. Now, as it relates to politics, and I offend people on both sides. My hope is not who's in the White House. Yeah. And so many people who are Christians, I think they're much more dialed into politics as their hope than they are really Jesus being their hope. And so, but I have political views and leanings, but I believe in our day, the hope is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I don't want to alienate anybody, in that. And so trying to sort of thread that needle, if you will, has been a challenge at times. Leading through COVID was probably one of the hardest things, because we had so many people who I love that left our church because of, decisions we made, and none of us knew what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. We were all learning on the fly.
Oh man. I had,
that wasn't in the seminary manual.
No, good grief. it was so hard, and everybody wanted to make it political, and
Yeah.
it really wasn't,
Yeah.
for me. I did not know.
Yeah.
I was just trying to talk to the smartest people I knew medically, but I think that's just the culture we live in today.
Yeah.
Everything you say
is
is sort of a lightning rod, and if you say this, well, whatever, you're this or that, and I just come back to that thing. I don't want to just deliberately alienate myself. Our country is divided politically, right?
Sure.
And so that means 50% of the people in our city probably have different political views than I do.
Right.
And I want to see them reach for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so I don't want to do something that's going to cost me the opportunity to do that. That's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, I want to say personally, having sat under your leadership just as a church member, also as a deacon, and briefly as a staff member.
We ran you off, man. I tell you what.
That I really do appreciate that approach of not letting, those things that aren't political, that are more moral, biblical type issues, not be political, and standing firm on those things, while also not getting into the fray of the divisive rhetoric, so to speak, that really can distract people from the ultimate mission, which is winning people to Christ. So I want to commend you on that as just a leader. So we've talked a little bit about the growth of New Vision, and which has really just grown with the city. You talk about Thompson Lane getting put in and all these things that weren't really in your control at all, but really just spurred this massive growth. How do you foster this sense of belonging and unity within the congregation and really the wider community, especially in a church the size of New Vision?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And I'll say this, not to answer your question, but I do think a good example, and not to totally date this, but you recently preached on Romans 9, which talk about divisiveness has the ability to kind of be a divisive issue. And so I think what I appreciated about it is leading up to that, the deacon body got an email and said Brady wants to do the communion at the end, and I really appreciated, especially after having sat through your message of, this is recognizing the fact, and this is a small thing. There's plenty of other things that I want you to elaborate on, but there's so much that we have to be divided over and to kind of quarrel about within the church today that distract us from this ultimate hope and taking the gospel to the community and to the nations, that we sometimes it divides us, right? And so you said we're going to do communion at the end of service because it's something that really unifies people. Anytime you sit around the table with people, there's just something unifying about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that was something unique at the end of that service specifically. But how do you continue to kind of foster unity and a sense of belonging, and especially you talked about people who don't like the growth that New Vision's experienced. So how do you kind of handle all of that?
You'll never have me back after I give you this answer, but I've got one shot. I can't sit and tell you a leadership principle that, you do this, and this, and it's going to work.
Right.
I could tell you a story. Like, there was a guy recently in the last year or so I was talking to. He's a young guy in business, and maybe folks, men and women, are listening, they're in business, this might relate. His career just exploded. I mean, just absolutely exploded. And so I was talking to him just a little bit about, how did this happen? And he said, it was the craziest thing. He said, I was made a decision. I wanted to work on my marriage. I wanted to just, really get it dialed in a little bit more spiritually than I've been. And he said, my wife asked me to take our 4-year-old to a little birthday party at a bounce, a little place here in town. I don't know where the kids go, and the trampoline thing. He said, so I just begrudgingly, on this Saturday morning, he said, I had 50 things that I probably could have been doing. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And he's there. He meets a guy who's another dad who's there with their 4-year-old at a birthday party who doesn't want to be there. And they start talking. And then all of a sudden, I won't go into too much, all of a sudden they have this business opportunity that they just come together on, and it just blows up. And he said, I went to take my little girl to a birthday party, and it's like, it wasn't like this seminar or I read 5 books on leadership,
5-step strategy that he followed.
I was at a trampoline house, so I would just try that if I was you. And I think that's just the way God does it. If I could sit here and tell you, hey, here's the techniques that led to that, then that's just a joke. It was what God did. But at the same time, I don't want to try to Jesus juke you either. I mean, in a sense, one of the things that we've just always tried to do is when we sit with leadership in our church, we want to we just kind of have this empty chair sort of mentality. Like, who's the one that's not here yet? They don't have a voice at this meeting. Let's give them a voice. Let's think about the one who's not here yet. You know, and I think, you know, we exist for people who aren't even here yet, and tried to create that, if you will, create that culture that this isn't really about us. This is about them. They're not even here yet. And so our people have been willing to, I mean, it's hard to come to New Vision on a Sunday morning. The parking is terrible. It's crowded at times, and the halls but people have changed services. They've been willing to just do all kinds of different things. Come on Thursday night instead of Sunday morning, just like whatever, because it's it's making room for somebody who's not yet here. That's the goal. And so, that's been important.
Well, and I think, one of the things that, you guys have done so well is, and some people gripe about this, but having experienced it, I appreciate, really the push that you guys make for small groups. Or, which really we some of us have joked recently that it's really just Sunday school.
Yeah, that's right. It is. I'm for that.
We just don't call it that anymore.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, I think for us, that's where New Vision really shrunk.
Yeah.
Is we started serving, we got involved in a small group, and then all of a sudden my parents were with us this past weekend. They're moving here.
Yeah.
And I walked with them from service to get our kids in the children's wing, and it was like every 5 steps I'm seeing somebody that I know. My mom's like, good grief, you just know everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, well, not really everybody, but it just all of a sudden, because of our connection within the church body, it no longer seems like this just large church.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, that's just where we've experienced, there's tons of ups and downs in this life, right?
Yeah.
And so it's when you're in the valleys that you really need those people that are sitting around that table with you in the new small groups building, to come around you and bring you meals, or come sit with you and just sit in the silence, or whatever the need is at the time. So that's been a tremendous blessing to us.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I think about systems, and I think I do think this translates to whatever your business is. As a leader, I think you have to think about systems. And I remember in the early days at New Vision, I was preaching, I was visiting the hospital, I'd come back to the office that afternoon, there'd be 3 counseling sessions back to back to back. So you're doing everything. And I learned very quickly, I can't do that. I wasn't very good at it. And, but to be sustainable, you have to build some systems. So building a biblical counseling center, which now over the years, that's in place. But small groups to me have been the key. And that's just a hill that we're just going to die on, because it is where people are cared for. I can't do that. I tell this story all the time. There's a lady, just a terrible situation. Her husband really drops dead of a heart attack, a relatively young guy. So she's just living over on the north side of town. She's probably 7 minutes away from the hospital. Ambulance gets there. She gets on Group Me with her small group, and she just says, this has just happened. I'm headed to the hospital. And she said by the time she got to the hospital, again, it's about a 7-minute drive from where she's at. She said there were like 7 out of the 10 ladies in her small group who were already there.
Wow.
And she said, I didn't even know this had happened until a day later. She said to me, she said, I would not have survived that night had it not been for those ladies who were they literally just carried me.
Yeah.
And I just want that for everybody. I mean, that's, again, I'm in a group of guys. I need it. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I learn best by hearing other people's story.
Yeah.
I don't learn best by some dude standing up and preaching and teaching. And that's, and I do it for a living, but I learn best by being in a circle with other guys, really talking about what God's doing in their life, what he's showing them. And then, man, those difficult seasons, we're just going to have some, it's not a matter of if something's coming, it's just when.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we kind of wrap this thing up, let's talk a little bit about, you kind of alluded to systems. So, just generally speaking, this have to be this elaborate thing, but what are some habits or disciplines that have really helped you, not necessarily even lead, but have helped you stay grounded and continue to grow just as a leader?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. I would, the climate as a leader, whether you're a business owner, you're a pastor, things have changed as far as the workforce has changed.
Right.
Really. And so, and I don't think it's all, I'm not one of those that says it's all for the worse. Sure. It seems that every generation thinks the generation below them is lazy, and doesn't know how to work or whatever. I think what the younger generation, they want development.
Yeah.
They want some of you. And so one of the systems that I have put in place, like, before I came here, I had lunch with one of our teams. I'm trying to give more of myself to our teams.
Yeah.
Amy and I have all of our teams into our home. We every Sunday night, just about in the summer, we've got a team over with, their spouses and their kids, and something happens when somebody gets in your house.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
So my point is, I think development is a system. I spend more time probably in developing our leaders, and even hearing them say, hey, right now you're doing this job, but I know in 5 years you'd like to be doing my job.
Sure.
And so I want to help you, like, you stay faithful with what you're doing, but I want to help you develop the skills and get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this generation wants. They want to be developed.
Yeah.
And so that's been a different thing, probably for me, and something, a rhythm that has sort of changed in the way I lead. I get frustrated sometimes when guys say, Pastor Brady, I live in the real world, or I work in the real world, as if the biblical principles don't work. I mean, this idea of Jesus is the best leader who's ever lived.
Right.
If you think about what he did, I mean, he took a group of misfits from probably, you think about the 12 apostles, they probably come from 7 different political kind of backgrounds. Right. This is a diverse group of guys. You got a tax collector who's a sellout to Rome, and you got another dude who wants to kill every Roman he sees, and Simon Peter. There couldn't be 2 more difficult dudes in the world. And yet he brings them together, and they coalesce under this mission, and they literally turn the world upside down.
Yeah.
And they're uneducated. And so my point is, these biblical principles, they will play in every facet of our life if we just trust them.
Yeah.
I don't think you can show me a better
guide.
A better leader than that.
Yeah.
So
how do you balance the demands of ministry and leading a church like New Vision? It may be easier now that you guys are empty nesters, but also that, with kind of personal family life. And I think that's why I so appreciated the kind of how we kicked the year off with the Keep the Change series. Yeah. And I actually 2 or 3 years ago read John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and talk about a book that just really kicks you below the belt a little bit, because there's some challenging things in there, just that really are challenging. So I appreciated that. But so how do you you had to preach a few times during that series. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some things,
Yeah.
that you had to bring that were even challenging for yourself. So how do you kind of find that balance?
Yeah. I wish I could give you a good answer. I want to say this just very quickly. Guys and gals that are your age, it is the toughest season in life because your career is taking off and the demands at home are there.
Yeah.
And so, man, that's the folks that I probably want to spend the bulk of my time with because it's the toughest season in life. You alluded to it right now. I'm an empty nester, so we have more time than we've ever had. But I'm on the backside of my career now too. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of it's unfair a little bit. But I think if you can just be patient, what I would say to my younger self or what I would say to you is I think I think you got to be patient with it a little bit. You're going to have time, but what you're not going to get back is you're not going to get back that time with your kids.
Yeah.
You're not going to get back that investment that you need to make in your marriage. I mean, and so you've got to be okay with saying no.
Yeah.
And because people will take everything you have.
Yeah.
And they'll kill you and then they'll move on to somebody else, but you've got to set those, and that I had to learn that the hard way, man. And I did. So the way I have balance in my life is we kind of get away. And so if I'm in town, I'm in the middle of something, but I find that we can just get away and my mother-in-law's got a little place about 2 hours away that, we just go and stay for a few days. And that kind of is a way for us to rest.
Yeah.
And I'm a dude, I like to get out on the lake. That's how I kind of have some balance. I get out but finding something that refreshes you is a really important thing too.
Yeah. And you like a little UT sports here and there too. Maybe.
Yeah, man, I'm all in. That's for sure.
It is baseball season.
I know. I talk to I don't watch. I used to watch Major League Baseball. I watch, every chance I can get to watch UT games now because you can see everything streaming. So it's changed. And then we have kids who are playing all over the country in college, and so you can go online and I can watch them, and wherever they're playing, which is not been good for my marriage, but I sure enjoy it. That's for sure.
I know I've totally ruined our oldest. He's just obsessed with everything UT. So he wants to watch football, basketball, baseball, and I'll never forget literally the night we won the national championship game in baseball last June. We're putting him to bed, and he said, "Dad, does UT soccer start tomorrow?"
he's ready. It's kind of. We have been in the wilderness for a long time, so we're at least enjoying a little bit of a little good run right now. So that's good.
So as we wrap up, the last question I have for you, which I ask everybody, is what are you reading or doing right now to kind of help your personal spiritual growth and development?
Yeah, his name is, he's a Scottish pastor. He's passed away. His last name is McShane. He has just on a YouVersion, he has a Bible reading plan. And this is a terrible thing to say as a pastor. I read scripture most every morning, but just having a consistent plan has been a hard thing for me to do. Yeah. And I'll start in Genesis and I'll drop off in Leviticus, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes. But his plan has been so helpful. And so I'm going my second year through that. It's an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, and then like a Psalm or Proverbs. And so it's really, really good. So that's been helpful. You mentioned Comer's books. I read I always say it wrong, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I read it a year and a half ago. I just reread it because it was so helpful. And I've read all three of, I think, his books. But I'm a preacher, so I'm right now, everything I can get my hands on as it relates to Romans, because we're going through Romans, I'm reading that.
Yep.
But then I read Bassmasters and VolQuest on top of that. That's other reading that I do that are pretty sacred stuff.
I don't have a VolQuest account, but I've for I guess since 13 when I graduated UT, I'm in a fantasy football league with guys I graduated with there. and we have a text thread that is always going.
Yeah.
And they always keep me informed as to what VolQuest is saying.
Yeah. Amy, my wife, she's like, oh gosh, I wish we would have never started that. But I have to read every article. So anyways, I haven't yet posted it on the message board yet.
Yeah,
I haven't done that, but I read articles for sure. Yeah.
That's good. Well, Pastor Brady, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on, and this has been fun. I enjoyed it. So I hope you did too. And I know others will as well. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.